9th, call the meeting December 9th, 2019 is now in session. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Copies of the draft meeting minutes for November 7th and November 19th, two meetings, and November 26th, have been provided to the council members and also been posted on the city website. Communications includes the mayor's veto of local law number 2, which we will talk about after we do the resolutions. First resolution is appointing Commissioner Deeds. Do I have an introduction in a second? John. Second? Duan. Sorry. The second resolution authorizes the mayor to execute a contract with Star White House for design and construction oversight services in connection with the Promenade Hill Park renovation project. This is one of the projects in the DRI, and the DRI committee selected this company to do design and construction, and now we're ready to sign the contract for those services. Is that an introduction? And can I have a second? The third resolution calls upon the governor, the New York State Assembly, and the New York Senate to not cut Medicaid funding in the 2020 New York State budget. And I believe we have some people here who would like to speak on behalf of this resolution. Could you introduce yourself and let us?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sarah Couch. I work for the Healthcare Education Project at 1199 SCIU. It's a joint venture between the Greater New York Hospital Association and the union. And as you guys are all aware of now, there is a budget shortfall of billions of dollars to the Medicaid system. And we are here, I also brought some of my coworkers with me who are nurses and CNAs and local nursing homes. But we are just here because we understand that it is important for legislators to be fiscally responsible, but it's more important for them to be morally responsible to the promise that they made to keep Medicaid, protect Medicaid, and the people it serves. So I just want to thank you guys all so much for introducing this resolution and for partnering with us and standing in solidarity with us. Yeah, thank you.
Any questions from the council? An introduction and a second, please. Tiffany, second. Eileen. The next resolution is in support of the grant authorizing the mayor to execute a grant application for the Hudson Housing Authority. As you know, they are in the process of renovating Bliss Towers. This is a grant under the Community Development Block Grant that they are going for to defray some of those expenses, especially as they relate to the elevators and boilers. These will get done in any case, but doing it through this grant will keep more in their $2 million that they're borrowing for the project. Any questions? An introduction in a second, please. Tiffany, second. The next resolution is the first stage in authorizing the purchase of the new ladder truck, and this is to issue the bonds to finance the cost and to delegate certain powers in connection therewith to the city treasurer, who this document, this resolution, which might look a little unfamiliar, is in fact the format required for bonding. And we will, if we put this forward tonight, we will vote on it at our next meeting. Any questions? Rob, first.
This is, I guess, to Andy. Do we need to have two other resolutions with this? One for the mayor to enter into the contract and one for the sale of the old ladder truck to offset the cost of any outstanding?
We may, I mean, that hasn't been brought to me, so certainly if that's, I can speak with them, but it's something we could introduce next week.
For that finance committee.
Right. Oh, and by the way, this should come up
Yeah.
at finance before we vote on it, on 17th.
Need to know the.
And so in the meantime, can I have an introduction?
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
When does it actually start?
When does what actually start?
The bond.
As you'll see, it depends on when we finalize it. When we finalize this document, I believe is when it...
Does it affect the 2020 budget?
No,
No.
no, not at all. Nick?
And that is, the truck won't be delivered until 2021, and that's when payment is due. So
And
that's
while
what,
we're on the topic, note. Piero has informed me that the fire truck memo has shifted yet one more time to the 16th at 4 p.m. And I assume that that's the main firehouse.
yeah.
So if you want to get a look at this demonstration, it's the 16th, not the 15th, as I last told you. In the meantime, do I have an introduction in a second? Okay, hold on a second. Second? No. Okay. Next two resolutions are simple transfer resolutions. The first one is transferring internal transfer within the parking bureau. It's just a matter of they change their billing cycle, and there's no real consequence to this internal shift. Can I have an introduction in a second? Rob, and the next is a transfer within the police department from their uniform budget and their schooling budget to materials and supplies. Can I have an introduction in a second? Marlene, and who else would like to second this? Ron. Okay, now. Regarding the mayor's veto, I'd like to make the following comments. According to the veto letter, the mayor contends that we've had ample time to craft a suitable law and that a moratorium of 9 months is too long. There are two problems with this. First of all, as we've repeatedly made clear, the moratorium can end any time within those 9 months, once we've crafted the law. So that argument is moot. Second, and more importantly, we have encouraged an open and democratic process all along, and we're hoping to continue this discussion to make the eventual regulatory law as fair and equitable as possible. The veto letter argues that a moratorium doesn't, quote, resolve the important aspect of various forms of affordable housing needs within the city, unquote. This claim strikes me as simply bizarre. Nowhere in the moratorium is it suggested that the moratorium has anything to do with affordable housing. Nowhere in our moratorium is affordable housing, quote, conflated with short-term lodging. But make no mistake, if you turn an existing rental unit into a short-term rental, you have affected the housing market. That's not debatable. The last reason for the veto, that we're sending a message that Hudson is closed for business, is disingenuous to say the least. What we are doing is discouraging predatory outside investors who bring nothing to Hudson, but in fact take from our community. We have listened to the residents of Hudson, and they have said quite clearly, enough. So where does that leave the council? We can decide either to override the veto or to take the mayor's advice, that we've had enough discussion and we can come up with a short-term regulation by our next meeting. I leave it to the council.
If I may.
Sure.
First of all, I'd like to say at one time the mayor introduced the idea of a moratorium early on in this process, and when I wasn't so informed about the legality of such a thing, I thought it was impossible, but it changed my mind due to information and research, which I think the mayor has done none. I would say it's not as simple as simply passing an owner-occupied bill, as we've discovered through all the work that we've done, that defining what owner-occupied means is a lot more difficult than the mayor contends in this rather simplistic veto. Doing a moratorium doesn't harm existing operators of short-term rental, Airbnb, as you want to call it. So it does nothing in that regard to harm business or tourism. It just simply makes a statement about how we feel that we need the right type of legislation to look at other communities, how they're doing this. This is a worldwide problem, first of all. And if people want to call this knee-jerk, who voted for it, and seem to not understand what knee-jerk actually means. Knee-jerk is a response to something quickly, implementing quick fixes to something that actually don't really address the problem. So this is very far from being a knee-jerk piece of legislation. I think a moratorium is the best thing for the community, contrary to what the mayor says. If the mayor was involved in the process from the beginning, intimately, he'd understand what we were trying to do. So I think it's an unfortunate gesture by the mayor as he's leaving office, and I think the right thing for the council to do would be to say something to the community that we hear them, and I think we should overturn his veto and continue our work.
I agree.
Eileen?
Just, John, how long do you think it will take to craft a law?
I'm not sure, but 9 months is long, but it's not that long in the course of crafting a good bill. Could we be done in a few months? Yes. But having a moratorium allows us to do the right thing. There's lots of things to investigate here. We've got a lot of data. We've got a lot of things that have come in since we started this process. There's other cities that have adopted new short-term regulation bans, Jersey City, for instance.
Right.
So there are things that we could use and look at. So simply to do this, responding to a small amount of people in this community who have a self-interest in terms of either real estate, investments, et cetera, who complain very loudly rather than the wide community who supports this. To me, it's rather outrageous. So.
And in the interim, and you've said this before, I just don't remember the details of it from the legal meetings, but what, is it that none can be done, or if it's owner occupied, a new one could be listed? How complete is, how?
The first draft of legislation that we put out in the summer had a lot of resistance and feedback from the community that put the brakes on this process, hence we went toward a moratorium. However we define owner-occupied, and if we're able to say that existing operators who might have one additional Airbnb are allowed to continue operating that if they're registered as a business, much like people who operate inns and B&Bs and do the right thing here in terms of having hotel and abiding by the law and the regulation in that way, then we use that as a framework. But, you know, there's some things here that the mayor just has a nice little simple dodge here by saying owner-occupied and, you know, go for it, find your way out, where we really, it's clear that needs more. definition specifically for here.
And do you feel confident 9 months would be enough time to create
Yeah, I mean,
the law?
the other good thing about a moratorium is we'll see what it actually, how it affects, you know, the current, you know, if we have X amount of Airbnbs now, that will still be able to operate, we'll still collect tax from that. It's not going to hit the budget in a negative way, contrary to what Alderman Bullitt was saying. We'll get revenue from those existing STRs right now. And we'll be able to see what it does in terms of demand, et cetera, going forward in the period of time while it's in effect. So I think it's a good thing, it's a helpful thing to have something like this so we could deal with the legislation rather than say, hey, great, isn't it awesome that everybody wants to come to Hudson? Let's continue to do STRs without any regulation just because we want some short-term money. And, you know, maybe the tourism economy, they keep going like gangbusters, but let's not plan for anything else. So I think this is very, very short-sighted on the mayor's behalf.
Rob?
John?
Yeah.
So I support a change in the short-term rental law. I totally think that we need to have something in place to talk about some of the things we've spoken about in the last 18 months.
Sure.
What month were the brakes put on the fact of the original law? Like when did that?
July or August.
July or August.
Right, this came up in September. So, and again, I'd like to remind the audience and the council that the mayor was one of the first people to broach the idea about a moratorium.
Right.
So I think we should support the mayor's initial idea and overturn his veto and remind him of his very wise first choice, which was a moratorium. Since we all voted, most of us voted essentially for the moratorium in the first place. So I think it would be a no-brainer to overturn it.
Okay, well, we don't get to vote on it until our formal meeting next week. If there's more comment, there's plenty of time, yes.
I raised the issue. My concern is that, you know, we passed this 2020 budget with the understanding that looking at an additional $200,000 in sales tax revenue over last year and an additional $60,000 in lodging tax revenue over last year and an additional $25,000 in parking revenue over last year. So, having said that, you know, the moratorium, yes or no, how, and I'm not going to be here next year to make these decisions, but this will be up to you. How are you going to meet those numbers if there's a moratorium on Airbnb?
Those numbers stay the same because that tax is based upon existing operating Airbnbs, which will remain. This does not suddenly close the door on the existing operation of short-term rentals. So whatever that revenue figure.
Numerous people have applied knowing that this moratorium was potentially coming into effect, so that, you know, will increase. To cite those other things, I mean, whether those are affected by, I mean, sales tax and parking, is that what the other thing is?
Right, right, sales lodging, but that's additional over last year. I mean,
Right, but that's not based on short-term
if
rentals.
it's not your concern, then it's not your concern. Well, we'll see in 6 months.
Well, it is our concern.
It is our concern.
The idea is how do you have a sustainable short-term rental law, right? And we're not going to close the door and people are operating them right now. We're trying to find a way to stop, you know, I heard of someone who just, you know, people come in and buy one property, just develop it as an SDR, spend $1 million, however much money it costs to renovate the thing, to essentially operate as an unregulated hotel to benefit from tourism. So it's my personal opinion that's not a very good economic development model for the city of Hudson. So, you know, until we can find a way how they precisely regulate that in a manner that doesn't step on the toes of people who live here and are trying to supplement their income right now by renting out apartments in their building via Airbnb or other platforms. You know, my goal
And of
is,
course, there is a hardship clause.
yes.
So it's, you know, very flexible.
Yes,
Eileen.
So would you say the goal legal committee would be to get regulation in place in this time period?
Yes.
Or come
Absolutely.
up with something that would not allow the growth of STRs?
Regulate it so that if people want to do it, they have to demonstrate that they live here.
The first draft is already out there on the city website. It's
Right.
been out there since July.
So, yes. So the idea, Eileen, is if you live here, if you're invested in the community, and you want an operating STR, by all means, you're welcome to do it. That won't change.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Dominic.
John, what is the policing of, during the 9 months, of somebody who's going to come in and maybe not register, go under the radar? And-
Well, if they did, Andy's made this point previously, Dominic, that if they don't, suddenly, we have a deadline here for the enactment of the bill. Suddenly, if they're operating one and they've been doing it and they're not registered before the date of this goes into effect, we have a way out of knowing that right off the bat. So, and Andy could speak to more.
And more importantly, by the writing of the lodging tax, the penalty is quite severe.
If they're caught. So like a lot of things here, obviously with a lot of civil statutes, a lot of it is voluntary or self-enforcement. We do have the ability to track it online, and certainly with the treasurer and for the lodging tax itself.
Okay, no further comment. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go into executive session soon. But before we do, I have another comment. We're going into executive session to discuss the police contract. I just want to make clear, there has never been any effort to delay this discussion of the police contract. And when questioned, Officer Philly admitted he was here last meeting because of a rumor which turned out to be unfounded. It was highly inappropriate, in my opinion, for members of the force to come to our last meeting in full uniform, which can only be understood as an effort to intimidate. As much as we value our police, they have no say whatsoever in when or how we schedule what is to be discussed at our meetings. Let's understand what's at stake here. The police budget is the single highest amount of our city's budget. For us not to perform our due diligence in this regard would be a disservice to our constituents. With that said, we now go into executive session to hear from the mayor's negotiating team, and I invite Michael Chimides, the future aide, to join us. Can I see a show of hands, all who approve of Michael joining us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, yeah.
Just do a motion in a second to go into executive session.
Oh, yeah, okay. And now can I have, anybody opposed? Now can I have a motion and a second to go into executive session? Kamal and Calvin, thank you. That's the end of our public meeting, folks.
Is this the end of the meeting totally, or are we coming back?
No, we deliberately ended it here. There'll be no decisions made because this is...
So this meeting will have no public comment on anything?
On
Just
what?
ask.
On what?
I intend to make some comments at the end of the meeting.
When we come back from
That's all right.
executive session.
On what?
On what I want to talk about.
I know, what's the subject?
I wanted to talk about sidewalks and my zoning tax legislation. And I have a comment on the moratorium, and I'm opposed to Airbnbs ideologically and for a lot of reasons. But it's okay, no public comment, I'll leave. Thank you. I'm disappointed though.